When single dad and janitor Noah Wright opened the supply closet at Crestwood Academy, he never expected to find a frightened girl in designer shoes whispering, "Please don't tell them I'm here." What she revealed next would change not only her future but his and his son's forever. If you're hooked already, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping, feel-good stories that prove kindness can change everything. Rain hissed against the windows of Crestwood Academy, a steady rhythm that filled the stillness of the empty halls. The custodial closet door creaked shut behind Noah Wright as he hoisted the mop bucket, its worn wheels squealing against the polished marble floor. The school had long since emptied of its students and staff, leaving behind only the scent of disinfectant, old books, and the faint trace of expensive perfume from the headmistress's office. It was nearly midnight, and this was the hour when Crestwood, with all its ivy-covered walls and oil paintings of forgotten founders, began to feel like a cathedral to silence. Noah moved carefully through the west wing, taking comfort in the familiarity of routine. He'd been working here for 4 years now, ever since Eli was born, and everything else had fallen away. The mop glided across the floor, water gleaming beneath the glow of antique light fixtures. He adjusted the grip on the handle, thick hands calloused from years of labor, and felt the ache in his lower back protest. He ignored it. Pain was a part of the job, same as the bleach stains on his jeans and the muscle memory that kept him moving long after his body said stop. He reached for his phone in his shirt pocket and checked the time. 6 a.m. A tiny, smiling face lit up the screen. Eli, gap, toothed, and muddy after soccer practice. Noah exhaled softly. His son was likely asleep by now, curled up in the quilt his late mother had made, worn edges tucked around his shoulders just the way he liked. Before heading to the west wing, Noah had made sure Eli's walkie-talkie was beside the bed, tuned to Channel 4, just in case. The hallway beyond the trophy case was dimmer than usual. One of the motion sensor lights had gone out again, casting the corridor in an amber twilight. Noah's boots clicked against the tiles, echoing too loud in the silence. He passed the art room, where the smell of turpentine lingered, and the science lab, its cabinets filled with jars of frogs suspended in amber liquid. He reached the end of the hall and turned the corner toward the faculty lounge, when a sharp, metallic clang broke the hush. It came from the janitor's supply room. He stopped. Noah had closed that door earlier, locked it after refilling the soap dispensers and replacing the broken mop head. The only key was in his pocket. His heart kicked a little faster, not with fear exactly, but with alertness. This was a private school, with gated entrances, security cameras, and keycard access on every door. Students didn't sneak in after hours. There were no rats or raccoons in this part of the city. He moved toward the door, his breath suddenly louder in his ears than the rain. The light beneath the frame flickered once. He reached for the handle slowly, fingers tight around the cool metal. The key slid in with a soft click. He opened the door. At first, all he saw was shadow, and the shelves stacked with bleach, glass cleaner, brooms, and toilet paper rolls. The bare bulb overhead buzzed, casting a trembling cone of light. Then, from behind the mop bucket, something shifted. Noah stepped inside, eyes narrowing. A figure huddled in the corner, knees drawn to her chest. Long, glossy hair clung to her face, soaked and dark. Her clothing was expensive, unmistakably so. The fabric of her blazer shimmered faintly in the light, and her shoes, God, they were probably worth more than his monthly paycheck, were scuffed and wet. She looked up. Her eyes were wild, not with madness, but fear so thick it clung to her skin like the rain. Her lips parted slightly, and in a voice hoarse from cold or crying, she whispered, "Please, don't tell them I'm here." Noah stared for a heartbeat longer, his body frozen between instinct and confusion. He crouched down, moving slowly so he wouldn't scare her. Up close, she looked young 16, maybe 17, though. The weariness in her face gave her the appearance of someone far older. Her makeup was smudged, mascara trailing in delicate lines down her cheeks. "I'm not going to hurt you. he said quietly. "But I need to know who you are and why you're hiding in a closet in the middle of the night." She shook her head, small and fast. "I can't tell you. You'll call them." "I don't even know who them is," he replied, voice calm, hands open at his sides. Her gaze darted past him, toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst through at any moment. Her whole body was trembling. He could see the water dripping from her cuffs onto the tile. She wasn't just scared. She was soaked to the bone and half frozen. He removed his hoodie and held it out to her. "Here, you're going to get hypothermia if you sit here much longer." She hesitated. Then, very slowly, she took it, wrapping it around her small frame with hands that trembled too hard to zip it. Her fingers were delicate, pale, manicured. "What's your name?" he asked again, this time gently. She swallowed hard and looked at him like she was taking a gamble that might ruin her. "Lena," she said finally. "Lena Halberd." Noah's mind stuttered. The name struck a chord, deep and sudden. Halberdas in the Halberd family. As in the multi-billion-dollar real estate dynasty, with their name plastered on skyscrapers and charities across the state. Halberd, as in the teenage daughter who had gone missing a week ago under vague and suspicious circumstances, whispered about on news channels and speculated on every social media feed. This couldn't be happening. His voice barely worked. "Lena Halberd? From the—" "Yes," she cut in, urgent, her eyes pleading. "Please, you can't tell anyone. They'll find me. They're looking." Noah looked at her, really looked. The wet designer shoes, the dirt under her nails, the terror that clouded her like fog. Whatever was going on, this girl wasn't faking. She wasn't doing this for attention. She was hiding like her life depended on it. He closed the closet door behind them. For the first time in a long while, he didn't know what the right thing to do was, but he did know what he wasn't going to do. Hand her over to someone who might mean her harm. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a peanut butter granola bar and a bottle of water, placing them gently beside her. She looked at the offering like it was a feast, murmured something close to a thank you, and tore the wrapper open with trembling fingers. Noah sat down on an overturned bucket beside her. The rain still whispered against the windows. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city kept breathing. In the flickering light of the supply room, a janitor and an heiress sat quietly, the space between them filled with questions neither was quite ready to ask. The storm had settled into a steady hum outside, the kind that seemed to blanket the world in a curtain of gray, turning everything into a quiet, waiting place. Inside the supply room, the silence was thick but not empty. It pulsed with something unspoken. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old wood, underscored now by the sweet, earthy scent of rain clinging to Lena's hair and clothes. Noah could hear her breathing, shallow and fast at first, but gradually slowing, like a skittish animal realizing it might be safe for a moment. She sat curled in the corner beside a stack of paper towel boxes, Noah's oversized hoodie swallowing her frame. The sleeves slipped past her hands, the hem hanging down over her knees. Her once straightened hair had begun to curl in soft tendrils at the ends, dark with moisture. Her eyes, large and watchful, were the only part of her that still seemed alert, tracking every movement he made, even the smallest shift of his shoulders. Noah didn't press her. He didn't ask why she was there again, didn't ask who she meant when she said them. The air was too fragile for questions. He just sat on the upturned bucket across from her, elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped, and let her eat in peace. Every bite of the granola bar was slow, mechanical, as if she were reminding her body that food was meant to be tasted, that she was still here, still allowed to need things like water and warmth. A drop of rainwater slid from her hair down her temple. She didn't wipe it away. "I'm sorry," she said at last, her voice papery and unsure. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You didn't," Noah answered, though his heart had thudded like a drum when he found her. "Just surprised me is all. We don't usually find anyone hiding in our closets, not after hours." She gave a faint nod, her gaze dropping to the floor. A stray strand of her hair clung to her cheek, and when she moved to brush it back, Noah noticed the faint tremor in her fingers. He tried not to imagine how long she'd been out in the rain before finding shelter. Judging by the chill in the room, her clothes still hadn't dried, and the cold was likely sinking deeper into her skin. "You're lucky," he said softly, "that I was the one who found you." She looked up at him, eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion but in disbelief. "Lucky?" she echoed. Noah shrugged. "Security would have called the police right away, probably wouldn't have asked your name first." That same disbelief hovered in her expression, lingering in the tight set of her jaw. Her lips parted, then closed again. For a moment it looked like she might speak, but instead she drew her knees up tighter and rested her chin on them, watching him through the curtain of her hair. "My dad used to say," Noah continued after a moment, "that it's always the janitors who see everything, because we're the ones left behind after the doors close. We see who lingers, who hides, who leaves fingerprints, who's really clean, and who just looks it." There was a beat of stillness, and then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "My dad used to say something like that too." Her voice was soft around the edges, like a page worn thin from being turned too many times. Noah didn't ask what had happened to her father. The sadness in her tone was answer enough. Instead, he stood slowly and walked to the small heater near the baseboard. It was old and finicky, but if you twisted the dial just so and gave it a gentle kick, it would grumble to life. He did exactly that, and soon the soft whir of warm air joined the sounds of the rain and the hum of the light overhead. Lena didn't move at first, but as the air began to warm, she scooted a little closer, stretching her legs out cautiously. Her shoes were soaked through, the delicate leather stained dark and puckered with moisture. Noah took off his own boots, stepping into the cold floor in worn wool socks, and placed them beside her. "They're probably a size too big," he said, "but they'll dry faster, and at least they're not puddles." Lena stared at the boots for a long moment, then at him, as if trying to decide whether this was some kind of test. Finally, she slipped off her shoes, one after the other, and lined them up neatly beside the wall. Her feet were small, her socks soaked and thin, and when she slid her feet into his boots, she let out the tiniest breath of relief. "Thank you," she murmured. He nodded and settled back onto the bucket, his legs stretched out this time, arms crossed loosely. "I'm not going to ask why you're here," he said after a moment. "Not unless you want to tell me. But you're freezing, probably hungry, and definitely exhausted. You can stay here tonight. I'll keep the door locked and check in on you every hour." Her eyes widened a little. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Noah looked at her, really looked, and saw the grief and weariness that didn't belong on a face so young. He thought of Eli, warm in his bed, of how fragile childhood had become in the world they lived in, of how little it took for everything to change. "Because someone should," he said simply. "And right now, it looks like I'm the only someone around." She blinked, hard, and turned her face slightly toward the heater as if hiding the shine in her eyes. The room filled with the soft crackle of the heater coil, the sound of her quiet breath, and the slow, steady drumbeat of rain on the window. Time passed differently in that little room. There was no clock, no calendar, just the warmth slowly returning to Lena's limbs, and the comforting presence of someone who wasn't asking for anything in return. Noah sat with her in that silence, not as a janitor or a stranger, but as a human being willing to hold space for her pain, even if he didn't understand it yet. Eventually, her shoulders loosened. She leaned her head against the wall, eyes half-lidded, lips no longer trembling. When she spoke again, her voice was no louder than the whisper of the heater. "I didn't know where else to go. I just started walking, and when I saw the school lights, it felt familiar. I didn't think anyone would be here." "I usually am," he said. "Night shift's quiet. Gives me time to think." She gave a faint, almost smile. It didn't reach her eyes, but it was something. A flicker of warmth in the middle of all that cold. Noah pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the time. 1:30. He should have finished the West Wing by now, but somehow the mop bucket felt 1,000 miles away. "Get some rest," he said. "You're safe here. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Lena hesitated. Then she nodded, curled back into the hoodie, and let her eyes drift closed. She looked impossibly small, impossibly tired, like someone who had been running for far too long. Noah leaned back against the door, watching over her as the rain kept falling. Noah didn't sleep that night. He sat with his back against the supply closet door, legs stretched out in front of him, arms folded tight against his chest to keep out the chill that even the old heater couldn't fully erase. The soft hum of warm air was a lullaby for someone else, not for him, not tonight. The school around them remained still, ancient brick and polished wood pressing down with the kind of hush only midnight could offer. The floor beneath him was cold and unforgiving, but he barely noticed. His attention never left the girl sleeping just a few feet away. Lena shifted now and then in the makeshift nest of paper towels in his hoodie, her limbs twitching as if her dreams refused to let her rest. Her face, free of makeup now, looked younger, softer in the low light. She had the kind of beauty you'd find on the cover of a magazine: angular cheekbones, full lips, skin like porcelain glazed with sleep. But exhaustion wore on her like a second skin, darkening the hollows beneath her eyes, tugging at her mouth even in unconsciousness. Sometimes she whispered things he couldn't understand, her brows tightening as though caught in the middle of a memory she didn't want to revisit. He let her sleep. There would be time for questions. There had to be. The minutes crawled by, and the heater clicked once as the coil inside settled. Rain continued its steady tap against the high windows above the lockers, and far down the hallway, the soft beep of a motion sensor light came on and then went quiet again. The school lived a strange half-life at night, and Noah had grown used to its rhythm. But tonight it all felt sharper, more present, as if the very walls were listening. Just after 4 a.m, Lena stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking in the dimness as she sat up, rubbing her arms through the fabric of the hoodie. Noah watched her without speaking, giving her a moment to remember where she was. When her gaze found his, something shifted behind it, a flicker of recognition, followed by guardedness. "You didn't leave," she said softly, her voice thick with sleep. "No," he replied. "Didn't seem right." She pulled her knees to her chest and hugged them. Her hair was tangled now, wild where it had dried in uneven waves. She looked like someone who had traveled through a storm and survived, but barely. "I didn't think I'd fall asleep. I figured you needed it." For a moment, silence returned, stretching between them like the hush before dawn. Then, without looking at him, she said, "You still want to know who I am. I think I already do." She turned to him then, really turned, and there was something like fear in her expression, but beneath it, a weariness that had nothing to do with being tired. "You don't," she whispered. "You don't know the half of it." Noah nodded slowly. "Then tell me." She closed her eyes, as if steadying herself against the words, and then, haltingly, she began to speak. "I'm Lena Halberd. My father was Richard Halberd. He died 2 years ago. Everyone thinks it was a car accident." Her voice grew flatter, more controlled, the way someone might speak if they'd rehearsed the lines in their head over and over but never dared say them aloud. "He was alone, coming home from a fundraiser. They said he fell asleep at the wheel, but he never did that. Never. He was the most careful person I knew, and the police barely looked into it. My stepmother was already signing papers before they even buried him." Her eyes opened, wide and glassy, like she was seeing something far away. "I didn't think too much of it then. I was a kid, and I didn't understand how any of it worked. My stepmother, Claire, she said we had to be strong, that the press would make things worse if we didn't stay united. She took over everything, the estate, the company, me." Noah didn't interrupt. He He could feel the weight of each word in the air between them. I started noticing things last year. Documents disappearing. Employees getting fired quietly. My trust fund, which was supposed to activate when I turned 18, suddenly had new clauses. Legal jargon I didn't understand. Claire said it was to protect me, but I overheard a call last week in her study. She didn't know I was home. Lena's fingers tightened around her knees. She was talking to someone about making sure the Halberd name stayed with her, about how things needed to be handled before my birthday. She said, "The girl doesn't know anything. It's cleaner this way." Her voice cracked at the end, and she swallowed hard, fighting for composure. I ran. That night. I didn't pack a bag. I just left. Took a coat and some cash I found in the drawer. I walked for hours. I didn't even know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't go back. Noah sat quietly, letting the truth settle over him like a thick fog. The Halberd family was synonymous with wealth and power, real estate empires, political fundraisers. Their family foundation had a building named after it at Crestwood. He'd walked past the plaque 1,000 times, never imagining that one of their own might end up hiding in his janitor's closet, terrified and soaked to the bone. "She's going to tell everyone I'm unstable," Lena whispered, "that I ran away, that I'm paranoid or sick. She'll make it sound like I need help. But I'm not crazy. I know what I heard." Noah leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "I believe you." Her head jerked up. For a second, she looked like she didn't understand the words. "You do?" "Yes." "Why?" He shrugged, slow and thoughtful. "Because I've seen the kind of people who'll do anything to keep power, and I've seen what it looks like when someone's just trying to survive." Lena let out a breath that shook through her whole body. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, the tension in her face began to ease. She looked so young then, so heartbreakingly vulnerable. It made something deep in Noah's chest ache. "Thank you," she said. He stood and reached for a folded fleece blanket from a bin near the door. He shook it out, walked over, and gently draped it around her shoulders. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. "We'll figure it out," he said quietly. "I don't even know what that means," she replied, her voice trembling. "It means you're not alone anymore." Her eyes filled again, but this time with something different. Something like hope. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, and when she spoke again, it was barely a whisper. "I don't want to go back." "You won't," he said. "Not unless you want to." Outside, the rain had softened to a mist, and the first pale streaks of morning light were beginning to press against the horizon. But inside the closet, the world remained small and quiet, held together by warmth, by truth, and by the fragile beginning of trust. The morning light crept in slow through the narrow windows high above the lockers, pale and diffused through streaks of rain still clinging to the glass. The scent of bleach had faded overnight, replaced by something softer, the faint hint of warm dust stirred by the heater and the lingering fragrance of Lena's shampoo, citrus and jasmine, half familiar and out of place in the supply room. The heater had clunked through the last hour of night, the hum of it pulsing like a heartbeat, while Lena slept, finally still. Noah had dozed off for a few minutes at a time, head tilted back against the door, legs stretched out across the tile. His neck ached, and his right shoulder had gone stiff, but he didn't move. He stayed quiet, watching her sleep like a sentry would, not out of obligation, but something more protective, something he hadn't felt in years, not since Eli had been a baby and cried in the night, his small body flailing in confusion, in need. That need was simpler than this, but the ache in his chest now was nearly the same. When Lena stirred, the spell of the quiet broke gently. Her lashes fluttered before her eyes opened, gaze unfocused, lips parted in the slack haze of someone pulled too fast from a dream. She blinked a few times, disoriented, and then sat up slowly, her body stiff from the floor, her expression guarded once again. Noah didn't speak right away. He gave her a moment to find herself again. She looked around the closet like she had forgotten, for just a second, where she was. Then her gaze landed on him, and she remembered. Her eyes met his, wary but no longer panicked. "I thought maybe it was a dream," she said. "Nope," he replied softly. "Still here, still real." She ran her hand through her hair, wincing when her fingers caught in a knot. She tried to smooth it down, then gave up. Her movements were slow, heavy, like the fatigue in her bones hadn't entirely let go. "Is it still raining?" she asked, voice hoarse. He glanced at the window, where weak sunlight shimmered behind thin clouds. "Stopped a little while ago, just missed now." She nodded and wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, like she still couldn't shake the cold. "You hungry?" he asked. She hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. Noah stood and stretched, joints popping in protest. He crossed the room to the mini-fridge in the adjoining maintenance closet and pulled out a plastic container. He had packed Eli's lunch that morning, just in case his shift ran late and he needed to hand it off to his neighbor who helped with morning drop-off. A peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a granola bar, and a chocolate milk box. Not gourmet, but real and enough. "I brought this for my kid," he said, placing the container beside her gently. "He's 8, eats like a machine, but I think he'd be okay with you borrowing his lunch today." Lena gave a faint, grateful smile and peeled the sandwich from its plastic wrap. She took a bite, slow and deliberate, chewing like someone who was trying to make it last. The granola bar disappeared quickly after, and she cradled the milk box in her hands like it was made of porcelain. "What's his name?" she asked between bites. "Eli." She smiled again, more freely this time. "That's a good name. He's a good kid. He'd like you. I'm not sure I'm very likable right now." "Trust me," Noah said with a half-laugh. 8-year-olds have a very forgiving heart, especially if you bring snacks." She chuckled, a sound that was almost light. Her shoulders relaxed a little, and the darkness under her eyes softened, if only a little. He waited until she'd finished eating before he sat back down across from her. "I want to help," he said carefully. "But to do that, I need to know what you want, what you're hoping for." She looked down, thumb smoothing over the edge of the milk carton. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just knew I couldn't stay there. I knew they'd find a way to silence me. Maybe they already are. The media hasn't said anything about me missing, have they?" "No one's talking about it here," he said. "Not at the school. And I watched the local news in the break room. No alerts, no Amber-style warnings. Nothing." "Then Claire's already working on the narrative," Lena said, bitterness creeping into her tone. "She wants me to disappear quietly. That's how she wins. If I vanish and don't cause a scene, she gets the rest of the estate, my father's legacy." Noah studied her carefully. Her face had changed since last night. There was still fear there, but beneath it, something sharper had begun to surface. Resolve, maybe. Fury that had finally found a shape. "Would you go public?" he asked. Lena looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Tell your story. On the record. Let people know the truth." "They won't believe me," she said. "She's careful. There's no proof." Noah rubbed a hand over his beard, thoughtful. "There's always something. Paper trails, witnesses, bank accounts. Secrets don't stay buried forever." Lena considered that for a long time, then finally said, "Even if I did, I don't have anywhere to go. I can't just check into a hotel. I have no ID, no cash, nothing. You have me." The words slipped out before he could second-guess them. They hung in the air between them, vulnerable and undeniable. Lena's eyes widened, not in fear this time, but in something that looked like disbelief. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You don't even know me. Not really." "I know enough," he said. "I know you're scared. I know someone hurt you, and I know you're trying to do the right thing, even if you don't know what that is yet." Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. "If you help me, won't that put your job at risk?" Noah exhaled through his nose. Probably. Your son? He smiled, the corners of his mouth tilting up slowly. He's tougher than I am. And smarter. For a long moment she just stared at him, her mouth slightly open, as if trying to absorb the simple kindness being offered. Then, finally, she whispered, "Okay." Noah stood again, feeling the stiffness in his limbs return, but he pushed through it. "There's an old records room down in the basement," he said. "Hasn't been used in years, full of old filing cabinets and broken AV carts. No cameras, no foot traffic. It's warmer than here, and you can lie down." He held out his hand. Lena looked at it, then slowly reached for it, her smaller fingers slipping into his palm. "I'll make sure no one finds you," he said. "Not until you're ready to be found." She nodded, and for the first time, she didn't flinch when he led her out of the supply closet into the corridor beyond, into the quiet morning light that filtered through the hall's tall windows. The school smelled different now, not just of polish and paper, but of something new, something quietly sacred. In her borrowed boots, wrapped in his hoodie, Lena walked beside him with small, determined steps. They moved down the hallway, past trophies and portraits and plaques bearing her family's name, none of which saw her now, none of which mattered. She didn't look at them. She looked ahead, her chin lifted, her hand still in his. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She was surviving. The records room at Crestwood sat at the end of a narrow staircase that descended beneath the east wing, where the old stone foundation dipped into the earth and the air turned cooler, heavier, with the scent of aged paper and mildew. It was the kind of forgotten place that lived in whispers. Most students didn't even know it existed. The janitors and grounds staff had long since stopped using it for anything but occasional storage. A single yellowed bulb flickered from the ceiling, casting a cone of weak light over the worn tile and the cluttered remains of a different era. Dust hung in the air like fog, and every step stirred the ghosts of untouched years. Noah pushed open the heavy door and held it wide for Lena. She stepped inside slowly, her arms still tucked into the sleeves of his hoodie, her borrowed boots tapping softly on the tile. Her face was pale, but less drawn than it had been the night before, her eyes clearer as they scanned the room. The silence here was thicker than in the closet, insulated by layers of concrete and time. It felt like the walls themselves had ears but chose not to listen. He crossed to the far end of the room and pulled a faded wool blanket from a metal cabinet. The fabric had seen better days, but it was clean and thick enough to ward off the chill. He shook it out and laid it across a patch of carpet that had once belonged to the library upstairs, now rolled out and faded with age. Beside it, he placed a pillow wrapped in a fresh pillowcase from the nurse's office. "This'll do for now," he said. "Not a bed, but it's better than tile." Lena nodded and sank slowly to the carpet, her movements careful. She sat cross-legged, the blanket wrapped tight around her. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers laced together. Her gaze drifted across the rows of metal filing cabinets, all labeled in peeling tape. Staff records, 1,980. 1,999. Building permits, old blueprints. The room was filled with the detritus of a school that had outgrown its own memory. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little steadier now. "You'll be safe here," Noah replied. "No one comes down unless there's a plumbing issue, and I'd know before anyone else." He watched her settle into the quiet, then stepped away to a corner where an old wooden desk sat beneath the hanging light. The desk's surface was scarred with years of use, its drawers half stuck from swelling in the damp. He placed his phone down carefully and checked the battery. Nearly dead. He hadn't charged it overnight, not wanting to leave the closet. "I'll bring you food in a bit," he said. "Some clothes, too. I've got a friend who might have something close to your size, and maybe some better shoes." "I don't care what I wear," Lena murmured, but she smiled faintly. "Just not those boots. They make my feet feel like marshmallows." Noah chuckled. "Deal." Then the humor faded from his face, replaced by the concern he'd been carrying since the night before. "Lena," he said, pulling a chair from under the desk and sitting beside her. "I need to ask you something. It's important." She nodded, eyes darkening with unease. "When you ran, was anyone following you? Anyone at all?" Her mouth parted, then closed again. Her shoulders curled slightly inward. "There was a car," she whispered. "Black. Windows tinted. I saw it 2 nights in a row before I left. It was parked down the street from the house. Then, the night I ran, I saw it again. I think it followed me for a while. I kept cutting through alleys, side streets. Eventually it was gone. Or I lost it." Noah's jaw clenched, his fingers curling slowly around the edge of his chair. He didn't want to scare her, but it was clear now that this wasn't just a family dispute. There were people involved who didn't want her talking, people who might go further than threats. "Did you tell anyone? Friends? Teachers?" "I haven't talked to anyone from school since last year," she said. "They wouldn't believe me, and anyone close to Claire. I don't trust them." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, the vulnerability surfacing again like bruises under the skin. Noah exhaled through his nose, trying to slow the racing of his thoughts. He stood and moved to one of the filing cabinets, pulled open a drawer, and removed a small stack of unused paper. He found a ballpoint pen from the desk and brought both back to her. "We're going to make a list," he said. "Everything you can remember. People you've seen at the house. Conversations. Anything that felt off. I'm going to reach out to someone I trust. She used to be a lawyer. Maybe she can help us figure out what you've got." Lena hesitated, then took the paper with trembling fingers. She stared at the blank lines like they held more danger than safety. Noah sat beside her and waited. Finally, she began to write. Slowly at first, then faster. Names, times, fragments of overheard conversations, notes about the estate documents she had glimpsed on Claire's desk. Words like beneficiary and forfeiture and sealed agreements. When she paused, her hand shaking, Noah leaned over gently. "You're doing good," he said. "We'll use this. We'll build a case." She nodded, her eyes shining now with something beyond fear, a spark of hope, fragile as a match in wind, but lit all the same. They spent the next hour going over what she remembered. Noah took photos of each page on his phone, just in case. He didn't know what they would do with the information yet, but he knew one thing for sure. They weren't turning it over to the police, not until they were certain they could trust someone. Later that afternoon, he brought her a change of clothes from Camila, a woman he hadn't spoken to in nearly a year, but who had once helped him fight for custody of Eli. She hadn't asked questions, just handed him a bag with folded jeans, a soft sweatshirt, and a pair of sneakers that looked almost new. Lena disappeared behind a stack of cabinets to change. When she emerged, she looked less like the girl from the news headlines and more like someone real. The clothes hung slightly on her frame, but the color had returned to her cheeks, and she moved with more ease. "How do I look?" she asked, with a touch of humor, spinning slowly in place. "Like someone who's not going to disappear," Noah said, meaning every word. She smiled again, the brightest it had been yet. That night, Noah brought Eli's walkie-talkies. He left one on the desk near her blanket and took the other with him on his shift. "If you need anything," he said, holding up the small black device, "just press the button and talk. Channel 4. She reached for it carefully, then cradled it in her palm like a lifeline. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." Noah stepped to the door, then looked back one last time. "You're not alone anymore, Lena." She nodded, and he watched her tuck the walkie-talkie beneath her blanket, the faintest smile on her lips as she lay down and turned her face toward the quiet room. Outside, the last traces of rain had dried from the windows, and the first stars had begun to flicker through the evening haze. Inside, in the dusty stillness of the records room, something had changed. A line had been drawn, a choice made. She wasn't just hiding. She was beginning to fight. Camila Rivera still smelled like diner, coffee, and lemon sugar lotion. The scent clung to her clothes, to the sleeves of her denim jacket, to the soft creases at the crooks of her arms where her bracelets chimed when she moved. Noah had met her in the back lot behind Crestwood, near the delivery bay where the dumpsters cast long shadows and the ivy-covered walls blocked most of the early morning light. She pulled up in her dusty red Corolla, stepped out with her dark curls tied up in a loose knot, and handed him a paper bag full of folded clothes and snacks. "God, you look like you haven't slept," she said, tilting her head and peering at him with the kind of focused, maternal concern that could slice through any polite excuse. "I haven't," he replied. She offered a tired laugh, but her eyes didn't leave his. "This isn't about Eli, is it?" "No, it's a girl." Her smile dropped. "Not like that," he added quickly, shaking his head. "She's 17. She's in trouble. I need your help." Camila didn't ask for more right away. She leaned against the side of her car, arms folded, waiting. She had that stillness about her, not exactly quiet, but full of intent, like someone listening for a vibration only she could hear. She used to be one of the best family lawyers in the city, fierce in a courtroom, always one step ahead of the lie you were about to tell. She left it behind after the system ground her down one too many times, traded power suits for aprons and affidavits for pie orders. But she still had that look, like nothing surprised her and everything mattered. "I can't explain everything here," Noah said. "Not where someone might hear. But I need you to look at some notes, a few photos. Her name is Lena. Lena Halberd." Camila's brow arched slightly, but she didn't react beyond that. "As in the Halberd family?" "Yeah." "And she's here? At the school? Somewhere safe?" Camila studied him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. "Show me." Noah handed her his phone, unlocked, and already open to the photos he'd taken of Lena's handwritten pages. Camila scrolled through slowly, pausing now and then to squint closer, to trace her fingertip under a line, her brow furrowed deeper with each note. When she reached the last photo, she stared at it for a moment, then handed the phone back. "She's not making this up," she said. "I know. Claire Halberd's been restructuring the Halberd Trust for the last 6 months. I saw something about it in a probate digest. It looked clean on the surface, but the timing didn't sit right." "So you think she really is trying to push Lena out?" "I think Claire wants the empire without the obligation. If Lena's deemed unstable, unfit, even temporarily, Claire could file for full conservatorship over the remainder of the estate. It happens all the time. Quietly, legally, and with the right signatures, no one ever questions it." Noah pressed his hand against the back of his neck. The pressure there had been building for hours, a knot of tension just under the skin. "She's scared, Camila. She thinks someone followed her. She's not eating much. She's trying, but it's like she's running, even when she's standing still." "Where is she now?" "Hidden. Safe. But I don't know for how long." Camila tapped her nails gently against her arm, thinking. Then she looked up at him. "I'll help, but I need to talk to her, face to face. I need to know what she's willing to do." Noah nodded. "Tonight?" Camila glanced at the school building behind them. "After dark. No one will see me." When she returned that evening, Noah led her down through the maintenance hallway, past the boiler room and the shuttered archives, until they reached the records room. The air inside was warmer now, less oppressive. Lena had organized a corner of the space into something that resembled a nest. She had stacked a few boxes near her blanket to make a low table, had rearranged some files into a pillow prop for reading. When Camila entered, Lena was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her hands wrapped around the walkie-talkie Noah had given her, the antenna bent slightly from use. Lena stood the moment she saw the woman, her eyes wide and cautious. She didn't speak. Camila took 2 steps forward, removed her jacket, and crouched to Lena's eye level. "You're a lot braver than I was at your age," she said gently. Lena blinked, startled. "I'm Camila. I'm a friend of Noah's. and a friend of people who need the truth to be louder than fear. Can I sit?" Lena nodded. They sat on the carpet together, knees nearly touching, and Camila waited, giving the girls space. Noah stayed by the door, silent, watching as the weight that had been pressing down on Lena's shoulders seemed to shift, if only slightly. She didn't look cornered now. She looked seen. For the next hour, Lena spoke more freely than she had before. She told Camila about her father, about the cold change that swept through the Halberd house after he died, about the strange visits from men in suits who never left cards, the whispers between Claire and her lawyer, the way the staff avoided eye contact when she asked questions. Camila listened with the attention of someone placing puzzle pieces in her mind, arranging the edge pieces first, slowly building the frame. When Lena finished, her voice cracking slightly at the last word, Camila reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "Okay," she said softly. "Here's what we're going to do." She explained that they couldn't take the story to the media yet, not without something concrete. But they could delay the estate transfer by filing a temporary injunction if they proved there was financial coercion or mental health manipulation involved. Camila knew a former clerk in the city probate court, someone who owed her a favor. It wouldn't buy them safety forever, but it would slow things down, give them time. Lena asked questions, some small, some desperate. Her fingers played with the edge of the blanket, pulling threads loose, braiding them tightly. When the meeting was done and Camila rose to leave, Lena stood too. "Thank you," she said. Camila looked her in the eyes. "You're not weak, you're not crazy, and you're not alone." The door closed behind her with a soft finality, and the room returned to its silence. Later that night, Noah brought Lena another sandwich, this one warm from the toaster oven, grilled cheese, the edges crispy, the cheese still gooey in the middle. She bit into it with a soft groan of appreciation. "You ever cook for anyone besides Eli?" she asked with a tired smile. "Nope," Noah replied. "Consider yourself honored." She laughed, and it echoed lightly off the cabinets. That night, when he returned after his shift to check on her, she was already asleep, curled beneath the wool blanket with the walkie-talkie tucked close to her chest. Noah stood for a long moment watching her. The girl who had arrived, wet, trembling, and silent, was still there, but she was layered now with something else, something beginning to grow beneath the fear. A steadiness, a thread of steel. She was not out of danger, but she was no longer alone in the dark. The world came crashing down on a Thursday. Noah was wiping down the stairwell railing just past the headmaster's office when he heard the voice, sharp, professional, carved from the kind of money that expected answers and never repeated itself. It was the voice of someone used to people moving out of the way. He recognized it before he saw her. Claire Halberd. Her heels clicked in precise rhythm across the marble floor. Expensive, glossy, loud enough to demand attention. Noah glanced down the corridor as she swept past the administrative wing, flanked by a security guard in a Crestwood blazer and another man in a charcoal suit who moved like he didn't belong there. Not school staff. Not police either. Private. Hired. The kind of man who kept his mouth shut and his eyes everywhere. Noah kept his head down and his hand moving, cloth steady across the banister, but his stomach curled tight as wire. His pulse drummed loud in his ears. Claire shouldn't be here. There was no reason for her to be here, unless she knew. He finished the stairwell slowly, deliberately, buying himself time, then stepped into the maintenance hallway. His feet moved quickly once he was out of view. The records room door was still locked, but he checked it anyway, fingers brushing the handle as if to reassure himself. Then he rapped once, quietly. The lock clicked open from the inside. Lena's face appeared through the narrow gap, her eyes wide. "What's wrong?" "They're here," Noah said. "Your stepmother. 2 men with her. I think they're looking for you." Lena's lips parted, her breath stuttering as she backed into the room. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if to physically hold herself together. How did they find me? I don't know. Maybe they didn't. Maybe this is just a coincidence. But I need you to stay in here. Don't make any noise. Don't open the door for anyone but me." She nodded, but she was shaking now, trembling from her fingertips to her shoulders. Her voice was barely audible. "What if they already know?" "They don't. Not for sure. If they did, they wouldn't be walking the halls like they're asking for directions. They'd have gone straight to security. Trust me. I'm not going to let them find you." Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast, holding the tears back by force. Noah left her there, locked the door again, and returned to the hall just as the man in the charcoal suit rounded the corner. His eyes flicked over Noah like someone scanning a grocery receipt. Nothing personal. Just part of the job. "Have you seen a student wandering the grounds?" the man asked. His voice was flat, absent of accent or warmth. "Teenage girl, brown hair, possibly wearing school colors." Noah raised his eyebrows, casual as he could manage. "This a new protocol? Usually security's on that." "We're handling it privately," the man said. Claire appeared behind him then, dressed in tailored navy, her sunglasses pushed to the top of her head. Her makeup was precise. Perfect. Cold. She glanced at Noah, then looked past him as though she didn't expect the help to make eye contact. "This is a delicate matter," she said crisply. "My stepdaughter has been having some emotional challenges. We received a tip she may have come back here. This place has always meant something to her. Sentimental attachment, you understand." Noah nodded once, slowly. "I'll keep an eye out. If I see anything, I'll call it in." Claire gave him a smile, thin, performative. Her eyes didn't change. He watched them go, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. The rest of the shift passed in the kind of silence that buzzed at the edges. The other staff members noticed nothing. The students were in classes. The day moved as usual. But Noah felt the heat of the danger now, like a pressure building behind the walls. After sunset, he met Camila at the back entrance, his voice urgent. "They're close." She didn't ask who. She just nodded and followed him. They found Lena sitting cross-legged on the floor of the records room, the files around her pushed into neat stacks. She had been trying to stay calm, to organize the chaos into something that made sense. But when she saw Noah, her composure broke. "They were here, weren't they?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I could feel it." He nodded. "You were right to hide." Camila crouched beside her. "We need to move faster," she said. "I've been digging through probate filings, and there's a motion scheduled for Monday. If it goes through, Claire gets full conservatorship of your trust. After that, even if we prove you're competent, you'd need years to untangle it. We don't have time." "I'll go public," Lena said. "Whatever it takes. I'll tell everyone what I know." "You'll need proof," Camila said. "Her lawyers will have statements prepared. They'll paint you as fragile, unstable, traumatized. You need to show them you're not just a scared kid. You're the only one who knows the truth." Lena's voice was a whisper. "She'll destroy me." Noah sat beside her, his voice low. "Not if we get to them first." But they didn't have the chance. It happened the next morning. Noah had left the school early to check on Eli at the neighbor's house. Just 20 minutes. When he returned, the front gate was swarming with security, and the head of operations was waiting by the staff entrance. They had a still frame from the west stairwell camera. A blurry but unmistakable image of Lena, her face caught in profile as she moved past the top landing. The timestamp put it at 2 days prior. Someone had gone digging. Someone had found her. "You're suspended pending review," the head of operations told him. "Effective immediately." Noah didn't speak. He only nodded, numb. They escorted him out through the front, in front of students, teachers, staff. He caught a glimpse of Lena's name on a folded report in the assistant principal's hand. When he got to the sidewalk, Eli was there, waiting with his backpack and a worried look on his face. "Why are they mad at you?" he asked. Noah crouched and touched his son's shoulder. Because I did something right, Bud, and not everyone likes that. Eli frowned. Is she okay? Noah didn't answer. He didn't know. But hours later, when he checked the walkie-talkie from his jacket pocket, there was a message waiting, faint, cracked, with static. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm going to fix it. Please don't hate me. It was Lena's voice. Then silence. Noah stood still for a long time in the quiet of his apartment, the city outside dimming into blue. Something terrible had just begun, and she was running again, alone. He looked at Eli, who had fallen asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Noah turned toward the window and whispered to the dark, Wherever you are, Lena, hold on, I'm coming. The bus terminal hummed with the kind of quiet noise that filled empty spaces without ever breaking the silence. A child cried somewhere in the distance, high-pitched and tired, the sound echoing off the grimy tile floor and the glass windows streaked with fingerprints and old rain. The vending machines blinked faintly from the far wall, humming their static chorus beside rows of worn red chairs bolted to the ground. The air smelled like coffee gone cold and too many coats damp from weather. The kind of place no one ever wanted to be, but always ended up in when they had nowhere else to go. Lena sat near the end of the bench line, her hands tucked inside the sleeves of a borrowed coat, a duffel bag at her feet that wasn't hers. It had taken 3 buses and 2 hours of walking to get there. Her feet ached in the new sneakers, already breaking at the seams. Her shoulders hurt from carrying the bag, even though it held almost nothing. A sweatshirt, a water bottle, a granola bar, the walkie-talkie, still turned on, though she hadn't dared use it again. She didn't know if Noah was listening. She wasn't sure she could bear it if he was, and still didn't answer. She kept her head low beneath the brim of a borrowed baseball cap. Her hair was tied back, tucked under the collar. To most people, she looked like a tired teenager on her way out of town. Someone who belonged to nobody. Someone no one would notice. That was the point. That was the plan. But every breath she took felt wrong. When she had pressed the button on the walkie-talkie, her hand had trembled so hard she almost dropped it. She had stared at the blinking light as she spoke, as if that small flash of red could somehow tell her she wasn't completely alone. Now, with the ticket folded in her coat pocket, she sat and watched the wall of departure boards flicker. Richmond, Pittsburgh, Albany. Places she had never seen, names that meant escape but nothing else. She hadn't decided which one yet. She didn't know if it mattered. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. A figure passed behind her, then another. None of them stopped. The world around her moved, oblivious. That should have comforted her, but it only made the loneliness sharper. She closed her eyes. She remembered the way Noah had crouched beside her, that first night in the closet, his voice low and calm, as if her fear wasn't something to be ashamed of. She remembered his worn hands offering her food, warmth, space to breathe. She remembered the way he watched her when she slept, never speaking, only keeping watch. Like he didn't owe her anything, but gave everything anyway. And she remembered Eli, the little boy with wild curls and sticky fingers, who had given her a dinosaur sticker and called her Miss Princess, like it was her real title, who had told her she could be part of their team. Her eyes burned. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. She should never have stayed, never should have involved them, and yet, leaving them behind felt worse than running had the first time. She pressed her forehead against the cold metal of the bench in front of her, her breath fogging faintly in the space between. Her body curled around itself. She wished, for one selfish moment, that someone would come find her. Not a lawyer, not the press, just someone who knew her name and meant it when they said it. A hand touched her shoulder. She jolted, heart leaping, spinning halfway around before she even saw the face. It was Noah. Not a ghost, not a memory, just him. His jacket was soaked from the rain. His eyes looked tired, ringed with worry. His breath came hard, as if he had been running. Lena stared at him, disbelief choking her before any words could form. "How?" she began, but he shook his head gently. "Doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is I'm here." She looked past him, scanning the terminal for danger, for Claire, for the man in the charcoal suit, for cameras and eyes, and someone to pull her back into silence, but there was no one else. Noah followed her gaze. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I brought someone with me," he said quietly. Lena's brows drew together. "Who?" She turned, and there he was. Eli. His small figure wrapped in a blue hoodie, curls wet and bouncing as he came into view. He held something in both hands, a drawing. "I told Daddy we had to find you," Eli said, walking right up to her like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You're part of our team." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing Eli's cheek, then cupping it gently. He leaned into her touch without hesitation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't want you to get hurt." "You didn't," Noah said. "But we were scared. And if we're scared, we don't hide. We stay together." Lena looked between them. She felt the tears fall before she could stop them, warm against her chilled skin. "I thought I had to disappear," she said. "I thought it was the only way to keep you safe." "You're not the one who should disappear," Noah replied. "They are." She blinked at him, confusion and hope colliding inside her chest. Camila stepped into view a moment later, her phone in her hand. "I've got the proof," she said. "Financial records, paper trails, everything Claire didn't think anyone would notice. She used power of attorney illegally, and I've got a judge who owes me a favor." Lena stared. "You're serious?" she asked, voice hollow with shock. "As a storm," Camila said. "You've got a press conference tomorrow morning. I've already set it up, and if you're willing to speak, we can stop her." The bus terminal buzzed behind them. The world didn't pause, but Lena did. She looked down at her lap, at the duffel bag still zipped shut and the walkie-talkie tucked beside it. Then she looked at Noah, at Eli. "I'm not ready," she said. "That's okay," Noah replied. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to be brave." She reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers, solid and warm and steady. And Lena, for the first time in days, exhaled. She wiped her cheeks with her sleeve, stood slowly, and nodded. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." Outside, the sky had started to clear. The clouds pulled back just enough to let through the first stars, quiet and pale. Lena stepped out into the night between the man who found her and the boy who called her family, and the city, unaware, waited for the storm to break. The city's skyline shimmered under the weight of early morning fog, glass towers softened by mist and faint light, their edges blurred like charcoal sketches behind sheer paper. Traffic moved in sluggish streaks below, headlights dull through the haze, casting golden glows across slick pavement. Somewhere, beneath that shifting gray, cameras were being set up. A podium was being positioned in front of the courthouse steps. Reporters were checking their mics, murmuring into earpieces, brushing damp hair behind ears with nervous hands. The wind pulled at lapels and fluttered the corners of printed press passes. Lena stood behind the glass of the lobby, staring out at the blur of bodies and microphones gathering in front of the courthouse. Her reflection hovered in the glass like a ghost too pale, too thin, too young to stand where she stood. She wore a soft gray jacket Camila had picked out, one that wrapped around her like armor. Her hair was pulled back simply, no makeup on her face, only the truth she had lived in her eyes. She gripped the folded paper in her hand, the speech they had written together, though she wasn't sure she'd use it. Her palms were damp. Her heart beat so fast it felt like a drum against her ribs, as if it wanted out of her chest, away from all of it. Part of her still wanted to run. but her feet held to the marble floor and her hand tightened around the paper. Noah stepped beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the quiet strength of his presence. He wore a pressed shirt under his work jacket, his shoulders squared, face set in calm determination. He had not spoken much that morning. He didn't need to. Everything he had to say was already in the way he looked at her. Eli sat across the lobby on a padded bench, kicking his legs and humming under his breath. He clutched a folder of drawings and a juice box, entirely oblivious to the political weight swirling around the room. His innocence was its own defiance, a kind of reminder that there were still soft places in the world. Camila entered through the side door, her heels sharp against the tile. She held her phone to her ear, nodding at someone on the other end. "They're ready," she said as she approached. 5 news stations, 2 freelance crews, and a live stream. You'll be live in under 10 minutes. Lena swallowed hard. "And Claire?" Camila's eyes narrowed slightly. Still radio silent. "She hasn't issued a statement, but her legal team is scrambling. They know what we're about to do." Lena nodded, more to herself than to anyone else. The fear did not leave her. It pressed down on her like a wet blanket, cold and inescapable. But it had shape now. It was no longer a formless shadow. She knew what she was afraid of, and she knew what it had tried to take from her. "I don't know if I can say it all," she said quietly, out loud, in front of them. "You don't have to say it perfectly," Noah told her. "You just have to say it truthfully." She looked up at him, and the lines of his face steadied her. She could feel the gravity of the moment begin to shift. She was not hiding anymore. She was stepping into the light. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she was. They led her down the hallway, through a side exit, up a short ramp that opened behind the podium. The crowd beyond looked huge from that angle. Dozens of reporters, lenses pointed forward like eyes without faces. A low murmur ran through them as she stepped into view. Questions rose in little bursts, names whispered with recognition. "That's her. That's the Halberd girl. She's alive." Camila stepped up first, adjusted the mic, and began speaking in a voice that cut clean through the noise. "We thank you for coming on such short notice. This morning, Miss Lena Halberd, daughter of the late Richard Halberd, is here to address the public directly. She has chosen to speak for herself." Then Camila stepped back. Lena took the podium. For a moment, the silence held everything, her breath, her voice, the memory of what had nearly broken her. She unfolded the paper, glanced at it, then let it fall to the side. "I wasn't supposed to be here today," she began. Her voice trembled, but only slightly. "If things had gone the way certain people planned, I'd be in a facility right now, or worse, declared unstable, quieted, forgotten." A few shutters clicked. The air shifted. "My stepmother, Claire Halberd, is attempting to take control of the estate my father built. She's already succeeded in erasing much of his legacy behind closed doors. I was told I didn't understand the business, that I was grieving, that I was young and confused." She took a slow breath, lifting her chin. "But I wasn't confused. I was frightened, because I found out things I wasn't supposed to know. I heard conversations, read documents, watched people vanish from our staff. My trust fund was being stripped, and when I asked questions, I was told to rest, to relax, to leave it to the adults." Her voice grew stronger now, steadier. "I left my home because I was afraid for my life. I was followed. I was being watched. I was made to feel like I was going crazy. But I wasn't. And I have proof. Emails. Transaction logs. Signatures that don't match. People willing to talk now that they know they're not alone." She paused, looked out across the crowd. "I survived because someone cared enough to believe me. Not because he had to. Not because he could gain something. But because it was right. A janitor at my school found me hiding and didn't call the police. He offered me food, safety, dignity, and then his son offered me kindness." Lena's voice cracked then, and she let it. She let the emotion shake through her chest before continuing. They're my family now, and I'm standing here today not as an heiress, not as a victim, but as someone who was saved by love. She stepped back from the podium, her heart hammering. The sound of camera shutters rolled like distant thunder, and then, slowly, people began to clap. Not all of them, but enough. Camila took her hand. Noah stepped forward and wrapped his arm gently around her shoulder. Eli ran up the steps and held out one of his drawings. It was a picture of the three of them. Lena smiled, and this time it wasn't small or polite. It was wide and real and full of something that felt like the first true sunrise in months. The crowd surged forward with more questions, more lenses, but Camila stepped in and waved them off. A statement would be distributed later. Lena had said what needed saying. As they turned to leave the courthouse steps, Lena glanced back, just once. Behind her, the cameras were still rolling, but she no longer felt like prey beneath their gaze. She felt whole, seen. She had opened the door to the closet where she had once hidden, and she had walked out, never to return. The afternoon light poured through the wide windows of the community center, golden and soft, catching flecks of dust that danced lazily in the sunbeams. Outside, a breeze stirred the branches of newly planted trees, their young leaves rustling with promise. The sidewalk was still wet from the morning rain, but it smelled like warmth now, like fresh soil and something waiting to grow. Inside, the air buzzed gently, with motion paintbrushes swishing against canvas, chairs scraping softly over polished floors, the occasional squeal of a child echoing from one of the activity rooms down the hall. Lena knelt in the middle of the quiet reading room, a paintbrush in her hand and a streak of blue across her cheek. Her jeans were covered in spatters of color, her sweatshirt sleeves rolled up past her elbows. In front of her, the closet door stood open. She had painted it lemon yellow, bright as a sunflower, and outlined it in soft white. The words above the frame had been penciled in earlier that morning, but now she leaned in with careful fingers and traced each letter in bold navy paint. Closet of Second Chances. She worked slowly, her hand steady, her breath held as she followed the gentle curves of the letters. Around her were the smells of acrylic paint, sawdust, clean wood, and something floral from the bouquet someone had left on the window ledge. The room was simple, still mostly empty, but light fell across its walls like a blessing. The door itself had been salvaged from the old records room at Crestwood. It had taken some convincing, but they let her have it. She couldn't let it be thrown away. It meant too much. Behind her, Noah stood with a box in his arms, watching her work. He had just come in from the lot, where he had been helping unload shelves and folding chairs donated by a local shop. His shirt clung to his back, the fabric damp with effort, and his hands smelled faintly of pine and sweat and soap. He didn't speak at first. He just stood in the doorway, watching the girl he had once found trembling in a dark closet transform that same door into something beautiful. "You're getting good at this," he said finally. Lena glanced over her shoulder, smiling. "It's almost straight. I think it's perfect." She sat back on her heels, stretching her arms with a little groan, and set the brush on the drop cloth beside her. The blue streak on her cheek remained, unnoticed, and her fingers were stained in every shade they had used since morning. She looked happier than he had seen her in weeks. Not the fleeting, fragile happiness she had worn in moments of safety, but something quieter, settled, rooted. "I can't believe this is real," she murmured. "It is," Noah said. "You made it real." She looked around the room. The bookshelves weren't filled yet, but the walls were freshly painted, and the carpet was clean and soft under her knees. There was a reading nook in the corner with big cushions and fairy lights strung across the top. One wall had a mural they'd all worked on together, Lena, Eli, Noah, and a handful of kids from the neighborhood. It was messy and colorful and full of animals wearing silly hats, because Eli insisted a giraffe and sunglasses was non-negotiable. It was a room that welcomed anyone. A room that whispered, "Come in," no matter who you were. Lena stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. She walked over to Noah, her eyes bright. "Camila dropped by earlier," she said. "The press still wants interviews. They want to know how the halberd heiress is using her reborn fortune." Her words. Noah rolled his eyes playfully. "And what did you say?" "I told them I was busy painting a closet." He chuckled, setting the box down gently on a nearby table. "They won't like that." "I don't care." He looked at her then, really looked, at the way she stood taller now, her shoulders no longer hunched in defense, at the way she moved without checking behind her, the fear no longer pressing at her back, at the spark in her eyes, fierce and bright and full of something bold. "You know," he said, "when I found you, I didn't think I was doing anything special." Lena's voice was soft. "You were." He reached out and brushed a spot of yellow from her wrist. "You saved yourself. I just opened the door." She took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Then thank you for opening it." Down the hall, a loud laugh rang out, followed by the thud of a ball against the wall. Eli burst into the room a moment later, face flushed and grinning, holding a lopsided paper crown on his head. "I made a rule," he declared. "Everyone in the building has to wear a crown for 5 minutes, or they have to read aloud from the dinosaur book." Lena gasped. "Even the adults?" "Especially the adults." Noah held out his hand solemnly. "Gimme the crown." Eli placed it on his head, giggling, then turned to Lena. "You two. You're the queen. That's the rule." She bent slightly and let him place the second crown over her hair. It was made of yellow construction paper, decorated with glitter glue and bent at the corners. She wore it like a crown made of gold. "You're very bossy, you know that?" she said. Eli grinned. "I learned from the best." Later, when the paint had dried and the supplies were packed away, the three of them stood at the threshold of the little room. The closet of second chances glowed warmly in the setting sun, and the air smelled of possibility. Lena looked at the door, then at the boy beside her and the man who had found her when she was nothing but a whisper. "I want other kids to know this feeling," she said, "that it's okay to be lost, that it's okay to ask for help, that the door doesn't have to stay closed forever." "You just gave them a key," Noah said, and in the quiet that followed, she leaned her head on his shoulder and Eli slipped his hand into hers. Family, she had learned, was not always what you were born into. Sometimes it was what you built out of broken pieces, what you painted in bright colors over old scars. Sometimes it came with peanut butter sandwiches and walkie-talkies and dinosaur stickers. Sometimes it came in the shape of love so steady it never needed to announce itself. Outside, the sky began to darken, the stars taking their places one by one. Inside, a single light hung above the yellow-painted door, glowing gently as night came. And in the heart of the room, once used to hide, laughter began to echo again.